in that short, we talked about the crows, the birds. I want to talk about this parable that Yeshua told. And I have behind me a real life illustration. This field that you can see here, okay, this little plot that we had prepared, we sowed seed last night in it. And less than 12 hours, okay, in less than 12 hours, this morning, we could see from the window there were 4 or 5 crows already in the plot trying to eat the seed. And I want to talk a little bit about what Yeshua, what Mashiach taught in his parable of the sower. And I want to approach just this aspect of the birds, okay? As a background, I want you to understand that my interpretation of Yeshua's parable is probably going to be foreign to you, to say the least. If you want a background for this conversation, go and read Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 23. Read all the way through 23, because when you hit about 16 or 17, Yeshua is going to explain the purpose of the parables, and he's going to talk about the prophet Yeshaya, the prophet Isaiah. Okay, he's speaking in riddles. Good background for you. The idea that you could just sow seed in people's hearts, in their lives, okay? And we can imagine that each person is the plot of land. And so you're sowing the word. You bring the word of the message of God, the message of Mashiach, the message of the kingdom to people, and you scatter that seed. And a lot of people imagine that they could just mysteriously, they could leave it and some kind of mystery would take place. And God would just, magically cause that thing to take root. Language like this, and I'm being facetious because people don't use language that slapstick. They tend to say things like very soberly. They think it's very, pious, devoted. They'll say like, it's not up to us. It's not up to us what happens to the seed. We just sow it. Okay, look behind me. Okay, if it's true in the natural, it becomes more true in the spiritual, not the other way around. Okay, so we ain't leaving this thing unprotected. We're gonna make sure the birds don't come and eat up the seed that we worked for. There's nothing in that parable that tells you embrace determinism, embrace fatalism. Okay, that's theological baggage that's going to come centuries and centuries later. That's not even part of the problem Yeshua was addressing in real time. So nothing about that parable says sit back and passively let or yield to God deterministically, fatalistically making decisions. Said more simply, nothing about that parable requires that you listening to Yeshua. Nothing about that parable requires you to say, God's going to control the outcome of everything without my involvement. Nothing about that parable says that. In fact, the parable is there to test you and test your heart as a sower and as a laborer in a way. Okay? You are a plot, but also you ought to be the sower. The parable was told to the Talmidim, the learners, the followers of Mashiach. And it was only partially explained to his Talmidim, to his disciples. But even then, he didn't fully explain it to them. Because the parable is going to expose their heart as well. See, at every stage, we can continue with the labor and the work. And I'm just going to talk about the first stage right now with the bird. Right now, this plot is unprotected, other than my vigilance and my presence right now. When Mashiach gives a little bit of explanation of the parable, Satan becomes correlated with the birds. I would argue that Satan is correlated with all 3 of the plots, their calamities. And you could prove that just by going back a few chapters and going to subtract 10 chapters and go to Matthew 3, Matthew 4, if I'm not mistaken. You're going to find Satan interacting with Yeshua and being tested in the wilderness. He's called a kingdom. He has all kingdoms under his control. So he's the one who can actually, he's the one who shapes the world order, right? And he's the one who's going to be able to tempt people with worry and anxiety, the seed among the thorns. He's the one who's going to send trials, according to Peter, the devil seeking whom he may devour, right? Who's going to come and try to devour people through trial and tribulation, okay? So he's the scorching, he's the source of the scorching sun and the heat as well, and the rocks in the ground that stop the roots from going out, that rocky soil. So at no point are we told to imagine God just decides everything. On the contrary, we are told to consider the plot and consider the risks of trying to be a sower. Consider the risks of trying to plant. Okay? And right now, let's focus in on the birds. Here I am standing by this plot. This will teach you something. The enemy doesn't work in plain sight. Okay? He can be brazen and it can happen, but not initially. It doesn't work that way typically. Typically, when you're not looking, that's when they come. And metaphorically, okay, this is a parable and a parable. I like using parables. I like using metaphors. In this allegory. Our brother, the Apostle Paul, Shaul, he says that Satan is the prince of the power of the air in Ephesians. So imagine that. These crows, you can hear them every now and again, even as I'm talking. They flew over last night when we were sowing. They have the vantage point. They have the higher order macrocosmic advantage. They can see that we're sowing. And they wait. If we were to go inside and stay inside, and there's no movement, and there's no guardian, they will descend on this field and they will eat up the seed. It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery. Your sowing of the seed of the word is the same. 1-to-1. It's not a mystery. You are not sowing into a vacuum. The very fact of God allowing there to be the freedom for you to guard after the fact or not guard after the fact, that choice is to test you as well as a sower. So what will you do with the places that you sow? By all means, sow. If you can't remain behind to guard it, don't hear what I'm not saying. You should still sow. You should liberally sow. I'm not saying come to that conclusion, but I am saying when you're in relationship with people, when you're sowing the seed of the word, and you come back the next day or a week, and you find that the person that you're in relationship with is, they had received that, but just it's like something just came and ate it up. But then you are lazy, or you are ill-tempered or impatient, and you're ready just to stack a list of attributes that are negative on that person and just say, oh, it's because you're arrogant, it's because you're this, no, it's because you're an impatient sower. It's because you're not guarding. It's because you're not understanding what's required of you. Do to them as you would want God to do to you. Do to them as you would want it to be done to you. Last night, our household watched Pleasantville. Okay. And there's a scene in Pleasantville where, there's this offensive painting that gets put up. And one person stops and looks at it. And then another, and they have this attractive force. And then another person comes and stands by them. They're just kind of muttering to themselves. They both have this shared dissatisfaction that binds them. But then those two together create an even bigger attractive force. And eventually a crowd of people are there. And what started as a dissatisfaction that was internal and then started to transition to muttering begins to be complaining and grumbling. And this crowd of people, they increase their attractive force. They're almost like conductors at this point. And they turn into a grumbling mob. And all that energy, it can't just remain latent. All that potential energy, like it's going to be expressed. And somebody in that crowd picks up something and throws it through the window. They throw this object through that painting, which was painted on the window. And at this point, it's helpful to think about this for the crows. Okay? It wasn't just one crow. It was 5 by the time we saw it. But I'm pretty sure it started with 1 or 2. Okay? And this touches something in, another conversation we were having this morning. We were having Deuteronomy 6 conversation with our children, and my daughter brought up Walking Dead. We watch Walking Dead every Shabbat. And she brought up this memory from Rick talking about the broken window theory, a sociological theory, an anthropological theory. It's the idea, it's about human nature. It's the idea that, if you want to establish order among human groups, and you let one of the humans in the group throw a rock through the window, and you do nothing about it. The act of doing nothing doesn't have no result. It ends up creating a kind of an attraction, and it draws the other humans in the group towards their destructive impulse, okay? And they'll inevitably break those other windows, all right? The same kind of thing goes for the enemy. It doesn't say the enemy, who we think of as a composite individual, okay, a celestial being. Hasatan. We think of him in the singular, but it doesn't say the bird comes and eats up the seed. And the bird is the enemy. It says the birds. Okay? It's the death of 1,000 cuts. If we did nothing with the birds, and they thought there's no harm, no threat. Now we also have additional investments in guarding, or in guarding the seed. We have these animals, right? We have dogs, and in particular, we're going to train this pup here that's rolling around the grass, right? He's a Great Pyrenees, and he's going to be a livestock guardian dog, and hopefully his very presence and barking, whatever, will stop predation, you know. But without that, left to its own devices, this field can't defend itself. The birds will come and they will pick and they will eat. And if they were left alone, it would not remain 4 or 5 crows. All right, that's what touches the broken window theory. It would be, and if you could see at night here, there's a beautiful plot of land. Typically, you'll see them go back and forth, different species of birds. I think there's an estuary near here. And you'll see the sky littered with crows. This field would go black. Okay? The seed would be consumed. So, when you think about the plot of someone's heart, their life, a person, and you want to share the word of the message with them, ask yourself, as you give liberally, because give liberally, sow the word when you're at a bus station. Sow the word when you're talking to a cashier. When you're tipping a waitress, sow the word. Okay? Sow the word when you're in your town center and you're around people. By all means, sow the word. But when you sow the word, particularly when you have the option of relationship, when you have the ability to relate and invest more time and more energy, your neighbor, the closer they are, the more proximate they are to you. In addition to sowing the word, ask yourself, how will this word need to be guarded? Will I need to guard it with prayer? How will I exercise vigilance? How will I be a living scarecrow or put up a scarecrow, metaphorically? What will I do to prevent those birds from coming? Again, don't imagine, oh, you can't, it's just gonna happen, it's fatalistic. No. The thing you can count on is, you can count on the fact that birds are gonna want to eat up seed. You can count on the fact that the enemy's gonna want to consume and devour and take away the seed of the word that you sow, which is a seed that grows into liberty for slaves. People have been taken captive by the devil to do his will. So you can count on that. But the question arises from that. When you sow the seed, can the devil count on you trying to stop it? Can the devil count on you? Can Satan count on you trying to prevent his efforts? This is a kind of thing that you'll need to internalize. Now, my son, I'm addressing you. What are the feelings in your heart? What are the thoughts in your mind after I share this?
I think it's really interesting that as we need to speak about this and teach on this, we have an opportunity to physically show an example of this parable.
Yes.
I think it's very helpful.
I agree. So. To me, that touches the idea of what the point of parables are in the first place, right? The idea that, and the parables were very close to real life. Like for us, it's very recent for us trying to plant, us trying to sow. That's kind of innovative and it's exciting for us. It would have been mundane and normal for Yeshua's audience. So we would probably do well to come up with parables about going to the gas station or clicking on a YouTube video or, because these are things everybody's doing. And the point of what Yeshua was doing is he was trying to address the blindness and deafness of humans who are enslaved to sin. And he's engaging with that blindness and deafness directly, and he's trying to reveal to them truth in everyday things they can't ignore. If all the parables were about elves or rainbows and unicorns, they could be great parables, but you could just listen to him and then go away and forget about it. It's like, Mashiach's ministry was based on Yechezkel, and Ezekiel Ezekiel was told by directly, these people are going to act like you're a poetic song singer. They're going to be swept away with your word. Then they're just going to be like, walk away and forget about you and not do anything in relationship to it. The desire is to try to get them to act on this truth. And so a way to get them to act on the truth is just to, use real life things. So I think it's awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah. What?
I think it's interesting that you said like the people who Ezekiel's trying to reach through prophecy, when Yah gives him words, and they just think it tickles their ears and they get a good feeling out of it, but they leave and never think about it again.
Yes.
I think that's kind of like the crows this morning.
Okay.
They eat seed and then they get scared off and they never think about it again.
Oh.
They just leave and they take.
It's like
and they waste your energy in a way.
That is really dark, because then, my son, so this is why I love the parables, because they're so manifold and so multidimensional. That would mean that some of the birds that are sent by Satan are people to discourage you, to eat up that word, to confuse you. That's dark. Now, I will say this, that I think also, because of what you said, you taught me something. It made me see. Then that means the land is kind of like the people of Israel in Ezekiel too, because the birds come and just take it away, and they forget about it, and they don't even remember the word that you sowed because it's gone, right? And that makes me that reminds me of this idea of what Yeshua's little brother Yaakov, James, right? Yeshua's little brother, James the son of Joseph, what he wrote in that letter. He said it's like somebody who goes up. It's the Torah is like this. The Torah is the truth, and so it's like going up to the Torah. It's like a mirror. You go up to the mirror, and you actually get revelation on what you are and what you look like. But then you have that revelation standing right in front of you, and then immediately you turn around and just forget what you look like. It's just like that. So that's great. That's awesome. Do you have other feelings in your heart based on what you said, or any thoughts in your mind?
Not really at the moment, but I'm excited to do this more because of how much opportunity we have.
Yeah, me too. It's awesome. Yeah, Yeshua bless us. I'll just pray. Yeshua bless everyone who's listening. Help them. Encourage them. I owe everything to you. Thank you that I have such a beautiful son. Thank you that you've given us to each other. Thank you that in a way you gave me to get in. I bet you keep giving a better me to get in. I don't think I'd be able to do this because I'm such an angry... I can just be such an angry a-hole. And you keep working on me, and you're trying to give him a daddy that's more like Abba in heaven, and he's just such a treasure. He exceeds everything I've asked for. God, in the same way, I pray that the church would have father and son discipling relationships, like what you've given Gideon and I. We still don't know what we're doing. But I request, Yeshua, that people watching this, that the shadow relationship of their father would somehow you would touch that. But then also that more substance relationship of people who should be discipling them, leaders. God, I pray leaders would be like daddies, and they would do Deuteronomy 6 conversations. That they would try to seek the hearts and minds of their children, their talmidim, their learners, And I just pray that the church would be more like a family. It would be more connected to real life. And I pray you would start a movement. I pray that people would long to figure out, how does church work, and how do we actually arrange ourselves in this world, and what is it supposed to look like? And help them to not be duped, and to see the ceaseless, tireless efforts of the enemy permutating his schemes, so that people are re-enslaved. Just like Paul says, do not again be subject to a yoke of slavery. People have been re-subjected to the yoke of slavery, and now they call it Christianity, or they call it religion, or they call it their denomination, or they call it their way instead of the way. Yeah, we love you. We thank you. Bless anyone listening to this, Yeshua, with your presence, and speak to them. The biggest blessing there is your voice. Talk. I ask it in your name, Yeshua. Amen.